Good morning. It's Thursday, June 15th, and I'm sure most of you remember the mess that Clarence Thomas caused the Supreme Court when it was discovered. I'm not sure it was really discovered. I believe lots of the people around the court knew what he was doing. But when he was found to having taken many expensive gifts from a major Republican donor and not reporting that information properly on whatever forms they use to track whether the Supreme Court justices are living on the straight and narrow, so to speak. But in any event, time has passed, and the Supreme Court has come out with nothing that indicates that they are even thinking about developing a code of ethics. And so now the issue is coming up in front of Congress. Congress does have the authority to create a code of ethics for the Supreme Court. I don't think you have to have a big deal. Just say we're gonna work under the same ethics code that the rest of the judges and justices in the country are working under. Is that so hard to do? Does the Supreme Court need the leniency that they have taken advantage of? I don't think so. But on the other hand, I don't think that Congress, if they get involved, is going to get this thing right anyhow. I mean, when you have a code of ethics, it's extremely difficult to say what exactly is the correct thing. It involves the amount of money that a gift that is given to somebody is worth. It's a very tricky thing to decide the code of ethics on how people should behave in a difficult, crisis-ridden job. I mean, let's not think that it's easy to be a Supreme Court justice. It's not easy if you're doing the job properly. If you have to take on cases that set historic standards for the rest of the country. That is not an easy thing. You have to do that with a clear head. And you can't be living a life that allows suspicion to creep into your decisions. You can't be making these decisions and hanging out with people who will benefit from the decisions you make. That should be a byproduct. Yes, he may benefit, but I don't know the guy, or I have very little relationship with him. You should recuse yourself, which they don't seem to do. Thomas especially. His wife was running wild on January 6th and continued her onslaught on our government, and he didn't recuse himself from any cases that came under his scrutiny. So there's a lot that has to be done to create the proper code of ethics. And I think a simple approach is the best. Let's not make it too complicated for them. Let's not have Congress jump into the mix. Because if Congress jumps into the mix, they are essentially violating the rule that there are three equal parts of government. So if Congress does something that affects the Supreme Court, that would not be good. That would not be good in the eyes of many, because Congress is equal to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is equal to the Senate, etc. And the President, that's the three portions of government, right? The President, the House of Congress, and the Supreme Court. Those are our three pieces of equal government. And each has a job to do. So we can't have Congress interfering with the job that the Supreme Court is doing. That would not exactly fit into the mold of the Constitution and what was written out and how to execute these things. But let's also say that the Supreme Court is not helping themselves. They haven't come to the forefront and told anybody what they're doing. According to Justice Roberts, who was asked about this ethics code, said he and his colleagues, he and his compatriots are continuing to take steps to address the questions of justice's ethical standards. But he didn't give anybody any details, and I really can't say I blame him for that, because once he gave out details, people would be nitpicking the shit out of them. So it's a very difficult situation. But there's a lot of people out there who are anxious to get this thing out of the way. And there are many people who are looking at the Supreme Court and saying, why don't they have term limits? Why should be allowed to be on the court till they're in their 80s or 90s? And in many cases, they might not have their great facilities anymore. So there are people looking at that too. But what's the proper age? What's the proper limit for a term limit on a Supreme Court justice? 30 years? 40 years? Age 75? There's a whole bunch of things that could go into the mix. And maybe that would not be a big issue if they had a code of ethics or something like that. Or maybe they got to have a different system. I'm not sure what that system would be. I'm not necessarily against lifetime appointments. But I think that there is a time when they either should just retire or they should come under scrutiny. How about at age 75? You must take physical exams and mental acuity exams, and you have to pass them. If you don't pass them, you quietly retire. If you do pass them, then you continue to work for another 5 years or something like that. Why don't we have something like that? I mean, it would be terrible if Congress has to step in, though, because, as I said before, that's a violation of the separation of powers. So how would we like it if the Supreme Court applied some rules to Congress and how they behave? We wouldn't like that either, and neither would the congressman. So this is a dicey situation that has gone on way too long. And I know it's difficult, and Robert is just sort of avoiding it in my mind. He wants it to go away. But it won't go away, because every time they have a difficult case, it will come under scrutiny. And this court is not exactly acting the way the law should be producing verdicts now. This verbiage in the Constitution which allows them leeway to make their decisions. And you know what I'm talking about, the heinous rules on gun violations related to a well-regulated militia. There's nothing in the Constitution that says people are allowed to carry guns. Right. But we can't get gun violence stopped. There is nothing this court can do, or any other court, as long as they stick to the ridiculous interpretations of the Constitution. So I don't want to talk about things like that right now. I just want the Supreme Court to produce a code of ethics that everybody could live with. And the simple solution would be to say, we're going to do what the regular justices. So I'll leave you with that this morning. Have a great day. Bye.